Shams tweeted out, this was yesterday. I thought this was interesting. Reporting for NBA Today on Sacramento Kings cornerstone DeAaron Fox, bypassing an 165 max extension as a larger deal looms in 2025 offseason. So essentially, he's saying that DeAaron Fox is denying or bypassing or deciding to not sign an extension. I think it would have been a 3-year 165 max extension in hopes to make an all-NBA team and get a super max contract. Now, what does that money look like if he gets that? Let me see. I think I saved this tweet right here. So DeAaron Fox, and I love DeAaron Fox. We know I love DeAaron Fox. But DeAaron Fox could command a 5-year, $345 million deal from the Kings if he makes an all-NBA team this season. $345 million deal potentially if he makes an all-NBA team this season. Side note, Joe Calvin asks on TikTok, what do I think about the Kings this season? We talked about the Kings last week. Shameless plug, go check out my YouTube video on I did a tier rankings for every team in the Western Conference. Talked about the Kings heavily there. Long story short, I'm a big fan of what the Kings are doing. I love the Kings. I've liked the Kings for the last couple of years. I like them. I think DeMar DeRozan was a good pickup for you guys. Back to DeAaron Fox. First thought is this. The idea of DeAaron Fox getting a 5-year 345 is, in my head, it's hard to wrap my mind around that. Like, just it feels like a lot of money for DeAaron Fox. It sounds like a amount of money for DeAaron Fox. But who am I to say how much another person can or can't make? Who am I to say how much another person is or ain't worth, especially when it comes to NBA players? I'm just telling you what it feels to me. It feels like a lot. If he makes an all-NBA team, then sure, yeah, he earned it. Go out and earn it. Can DeAaron Fox make an all-NBA team? I think he has the talent to. Like, he's talented enough to do it. It's going to come down to, for me, I think the Kings' record and his play. Because the Kings had a good record, a decent record last year. And he played good last year, but Sabonis made All-NBA. Sabonis was the Kings' All-NBA guy. And I think there's potential that happens again this year. That's just how good Sabonis is. I was having this conversation in my head last week, earlier this week, while watching the Starting Five show on Netflix. Who is the best player on the Kings? Sabonis, Fox? I go back and forth on it a lot in my head. I think they're both equally important to that team. I can see an argument for either or on who you think is the best player, though. That being said, I think there is potentially a world where DeAaron Fox could make an All-NBA team. Is it going to be easy? Heck no. Heck no. But now the all-NBA teams are positionless. It's not impossible, but there are a lot of good point guards in the league. We talk about this all the time, how deep the point guard position is and how it's probably the deepest position in the NBA. I don't know if he's going to make it. If I had to bet money right now, I wouldn't put money on DeAaron Fox making an all-NBA team, but I'm not ruling it out. I'll leave it at that. But speaking of the Kings, which I thought was not contradictory, but controversial, is we talked about how Jalen Brunson earlier in the offseason, signed his extension, but left a lot of money on the table. Signed a super team-friendly deal. And then that team goes out, trades for Mikal Bridges, is able to keep and retain OG, and then now adds Karl-Anthony Towns. Like Jalen Brunson signing that team-friendly deal gave that team a lot of flexibility, a lot of cap space, and they were able to make moves to make that team better. Now, a lot of people are saying that the Kings potentially have like one of the best starting lineups in the league, at the very least, one of the best starting lineups on the East Coast. The Kings won't have that same level of flexibility if DeAaron Fox signs a 5-year, $345 million deal. I'm not saying it's a bad deal. I'm not saying he won't be worth it. If he gets to All-NBA, he's obviously worth it. That's just the way it works. That's the way the CBA works. That's the way contracts work in the league. All that being said, I found it interesting that a couple days ago, the Kings traded away, let me pull this up. A couple of days ago, the Kings traded away Jalen McDaniels in a second-round pick to the Spurs, which is apparently, a lot of people are saying, a precursor for a bigger deal. There's some potential of a Zach LaVine and Brandon Ingram trade to add to Sacramento. Keep in mind, if I'm not mistaken, Brandon Ingram's on the last year of his deal. They're trying to figure out what he's going to look like for next year. So I think a trade for Brandon Ingram for most teams is a lot riskier than a trade for Zach LaVine, considering a trade for Brandon Ingram means, like, is Brandon Ingram going to stay? Is he going to resign? Like, those are the type of questions you have to ask yourself in dealing with or dealing for Brandon Ingram. Zach, I can look it up real quick. I want to say he's on a contract for a while. Zach LaVine contract. Zach is on Zach has this year, next year, and then a player option. Zach's technically under contract to 2027. Now, that last year is a player option, but he's guaranteed under contract this year and next year. You can go from there in terms of negotiations, trying to figure out to make things work. Do I love the idea of Brandon Ingram and Zach LaVine on the Kings? I don't think it's a bad idea. I think I like Zach LaVine more than I like Brandon Ingram, just because Zach LaVine's ability to shoot the ball. I'd be very curious to see what that trade looks like, because a part of what the Kings, I'm going to say, core is right now, or what feels like their core, is this nice young team that they built. Like, Sabonis was in the trade, but he felt like he was a part of the ushering in of their now, being in playoff contention regularly. De'Aaron Fox obviously has been there since the beginning. Keanu Ellis is a big young piece of that core. Keegan Murray, big young piece of that core. Malik Monk wasn't there his entire career, but has been there the last couple of years. Feels like a piece of that core. So I'd be very curious to see what piece of that core would need to be moved for Zach LaVine or Brandon Ingram and how they would fit in to the system there. The beautiful thing about the Kings is playing alongside of Fox and Sabonis. It is a offense that it's a well-oiled offense. Like the ball doesn't stick a lot. The ball moves well. They get a lot of shots up. It's a good offense to add a player of Zach LaVine and Brandon Ingram's caliber to. Once again, if I had to pick, because they already have DeMar, if I had to pick, I would add Zach over BI, just because BI also likes some of the mid-range game that DeMar likes. And Zach spaces the floor, but then you're back with Zach and DeMar again on the Kings, which is Bulls 2.0. But you have a good playmaker in Sabonis, so like it could work, because I always felt like the thing that the Bulls were missing was a playmaker, and we'll talk about that in a second. All in all, for the Kings, I like the Kings. I really do. I've liked the Kings for the last couple of years. I'm excited to see what they're going to do. I like that they are in talks, and like these types of talks, because it shows me that they're at least rumored to be an organization that's willing to make some moves. They're an organization that's looking at the landscape around them and trying to get better. One of the knocks on the Kings last year was that a lot of people feel like they took a step back from their really successful year in the 2022-2023 season, when they were like a top 4 seed, because they were just the healthiest team in basketball. And last year, it felt like they took a step back. And now maybe they're realizing that other teams around them in the Western Conference have gotten better. The addition of DeMar DeRozan was a step in the right direction to see, hey, what can we do to get better? And now potentially trading away Jalen McDaniels gives them some flexibility to do another move. We'll see what happens there. Continuing on, speaking of the Bulls 2.0, Lonzo Ball is back. And he's supposed to be playing